Welcome, dear grade 12 students, to this video, which is about the grammar of module 8a, student book, page 115. Today, we will distinguish between defining and non-defining relative clauses. We will understand degrees of formality, rules of omission, replacement, and punctuation of relative pronouns and relative clauses. And we will compose sentences using relative pronouns in different ways correctly. Basically, we need to know some terminology and classification of the relative pronouns and adverbs. Indeed, a relative pronoun or adverb is a word that introduces a relative or dependent clause. So the clause or the part of the sentence that comes directly after the relative pronoun is called relative clause or dependent clause. And this relative pronoun connects the relative clause to the main clause or the independent clause. Okay, relative pronouns are classified under three categories. The first of which refers to people, and to refer to people we use who, whom, or that. The second category refers to things, animals, and ideas, and to refer to any of these three we use which and that, and to refer to position we use whose. As for the relative adverbs, there are two relative adverbs. One refers to place, which is where, and one refers to time, which is when. Okay, is it clear? Now that you have understood the content of the previous slide, it will be very easy for you to classify these relative pronouns and adverbs. So please use your pen and copybook. Draw these categories: people, things, animals, ideas, place, and time, and classify these relative pronouns and adverbs. You take 2 minutes. 2 minutes, okay? Done? Okay, take this feedback. It's very simple exercise, right? Now open your student book, page 115, exercise A. There are 14 questions in exercise A, and this is the first of them. What does who refer to in these three sentences? Pause. Take 1 minute. It's very simple. Mr. Lee, who is from Beijing, who refers to Mr. Lee, right? People who like Chinese food, who refers to people, right? And the man whom I was introduced to, who refers to the man. It's a very simple exercise. Okay, now let's move to study the difference between defining and non-defining relative clauses. Ready? Okay, let's read these two sentences. Mr. Lee, who is from Beijing, is the owner of that restaurant. People who like Chinese food will definitely enjoy this meal. These are the relative clauses, right? There is a big difference between both of them. The first one is called non-defining relative clause. This one. It is written between two commas. Do you notice? What is its function? It provides extra information. So because the information here is extra, we can read the sentence without it. Mr. Lee is the owner of that restaurant. Okay? And because this information is extra, we separate it from the main clause by commas. But note that we cannot use that instead of who in a non-defining relative clause. Also, we cannot omit the relative pronoun or adverb from the non-defining relative clause. Okay? On the contrary, in the second sentence, the relative clause here is a defining one. So it provides necessary information in the sentence. We cannot do without it in the sentence. We cannot separate it by commas because not all people will definitely enjoy this meal. We say that only people who like Chinese food, okay, right, will definitely enjoy this meal. You got the idea? Now let's study some of the cases in which we can omit, we can cancel or delete the relative pronouns or adverbs. Please read these two sentences. Are both of them correct? What do you think? Ready? The first one reads, the advertisement which I was telling you about is on your desk. Okay? The second is the same, but without which. Which one is correct, or are both of them correct? Indeed, both are correct. We can omit a relative pronoun, okay, who, whom, which, or that, when they refer to the object of the verb. The relative pronoun is which, and it refers to the object. Basically, we can read the sentence like this. I was telling you about the advertisement. So the advertisement is the object of the verb tell, and which refers to this object. This is why we can omit it. Okay? Now, can we omit whose and where in these examples? Pause and take your time to think. This is the student whose essay was excellent. This is the restaurant where I take lunch every Friday. Indeed, we cannot omit them. Whose and where cannot be omitted or replaced by that. Okay? Now let's go to question 7. Okay. It reads, can whom and whose be omitted in these two sentences? Take your time and then follow. That's the woman about whom I told you, and that's the woman whose name I can't remember. What do you say? Indeed, we cannot omit whom, okay, when it is preceded by a preposition. When whom is preceded by a preposition, we cannot omit it, okay? But if the preposition is at the end of the sentence, we can omit whom. So the sentence can be like this. That's the woman I told you about. Okay, how about degrees of formality? Indeed, is sentence A formal or informal? This sentence, is it formal or informal? Indeed, it is formal. Right? That's the woman about whom I told you. It is formal because of the use of whom. Whom is used in formal speech or after prepositions. There is another question. How can we write sentence A in a more informal style? Right, we should omit whom and replace it by who, right, and move about to the end. So it can be, that's the woman who I told you about. Okay, is it clear? There is another degree of formality with using prepositions in relative clauses. Please take your time to read these two sentences. Okay, done. This is the house of the famous William Shakespeare. The house in which the famous poet was born is a museum now. Do you notice the place where the preposition in is written in the two sentences? In the first one, it is written at the beginning of the relative clause. Which the famous poet was born is the relative clause. The fact is, in formal speech, prepositions appear at the beginning of the relative clause, whereas in informal speech, prepositions appear at the end of the relative clause. Okay? There is another fact about prepositions. When prepositions appear at the beginning of a non-defining relative clause, do you still remember how we write the non-defining relative clause? Between commas, right. When there is a preposition at the beginning of it, only whom and which can be used. Again, only whom and which can be used in a non-defining relative clause when there is a preposition at the beginning of the non-defining relative clause. Is it clear? Now let's take another category of questions about using which in relative clauses. Please pause for 2 minutes, study these two sentences and the 3 questions. Think of answers and then take this feedback. Are you ready now? Question 9. What does which in each of the two sentences refer to? In A, that's the t-shirt which I bought in Doha. So which refers to the t-shirt, right? But which in the second sentence refers to the whole sentence, the whole idea right here. The idea that t-shirts at the souvenir shop were very cheap, right? So in 9a, which refers to the t-shirt, and in 9b, which refers to the whole sentence. Question 10. In which of the two sentences could the pronoun which, be replaced by that? Can I say that's the t-shirt that I bought in Doha? Is it okay? Indeed, yes, it's okay. Can I say the t-shirts at the souvenir shop were very cheap? That really surprised me? Indeed, no. How about question 11? In which of the two sentences could which be omitted? Where can I omit which? In A or B? Right, in A, which can be omitted because it refers to an object. The object is the t-shirt and it is in a defining clause. Right? Okay, let's continue. Take your time to study the last category of questions and come for the feedback. Are you ready now? Question 12. Which of the two sentences is more formal? I'm sure you remember that when the preposition comes at the beginning of the clause, it's formal, right? So sentence A is more formal because the preposition comes at the beginning of the relative clause. 13. In which sentence can which be omitted? Can we omit which here? It is preceded by a preposition. This is why in B, which can be omitted. First, it refers to an object. Second, it's in a defining clause, and the preposition is at the end of the sentence. 14. How would the sentences be if where was used instead? Can you rewrite any of the two sentences using where instead of which? Done? It can be like this. This is the drawer where I keep my passport. Great. In exercise B, there are 7 questions. Please pause here, take your time to answer the 7 questions. Join each of the 2 given sentences using any one of these relative pronouns. Write as many answers as possible. Let's take the first one as an example. Yusuf is a new colleague. This is Yusuf, our new colleague. I went for dinner with him last night. We can write 3 different answers. Yusuf is a new colleague with whom I went for dinner last night, or Yusuf is a new colleague who, between brackets, means we can omit it, who I went for dinner with last night, or Yusuf with whom in a non-defining relative clause, right? Do the same with questions 2 and 3 and take this feedback. Are you okay with the answers? Now let's move to the next category. Pause and take your time, then take the feedback. Are you okay? Now let's open our workbook, page 90. There are 6 questions. We will do the same. We will join these sentences using any one of these relative pronouns. Pause here, answer the questions, and then take this feedback. Then go on. Here you are, the last set of questions. Are you ready with your answers? Then take this feedback. Done. Thank you so much for watching this video, which will be on Microsoft Teams.